Hey, what's up humans? Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're gonna be diving back into that subscriber parcel. This should be the last piece from that, and it's the biggest. And as you guys can see, there's a lot of good opal there. It's got some good green-blue flash, but there's lots of dirt in it. When you shine the flashlight through it, you can really see kinda how far in those dirt fingers reach. And I've also got dirt on the top, but there's great color in there, especially on that one side. So I have high hopes for this piece, and I was gonna try to carve it into a couple pieces. And when we measure it out, it's 29 by 40 by 15 millimeters. So it's pretty big. When we weigh it out, it's a whopping 87.2 carats. So if you guys want to see how this stone gets cut up, shaped, and polished, keep on watching. Starting out, I used a ballpoint pen and I marked a line where I want to try to cut it. I'm using this Dremel bit, which is a diamond saw bit for the Dremel, and you have to be really careful with this, so I'm going to take it outside. But I also wanted to try to make a pair of earrings out of one side, so I drew another line on it. After slicing it apart, this is what it looks like. So there's lots of dirt in the bottom of it, but there's a nice clean piece on both halves. On the other side, the clean part goes a bit lengthier, but there's a big old crack down the side. That being said, I still cut those pieces up. This is the big piece again, and then yeah, these are my smaller pieces that I wanted to turn into earrings, and I'm gonna have to take some pliers and break off those pieces where the cracks are. So I went in with my pliers and I broke off those pieces. Now these pieces that came off with the pliers are not quite big enough to really do anything with, so I'm just going to use the bigger halves of those slices to try to create the earrings that I wanted to make. And this is what they look like after they've been broken off. Definitely something to work with there. Now, since there's so much dirt on the back of these, I wanted to start by grinding off all the dirt from the bottom, and then I worked my way around the edges of each one. All of these stones have lots of sharp corners on them, so it's really going to be a lot of focusing on those corners and just trying to get the dirt out as much as I can. Sometimes when dirt protrudes this deep into a stone, there's a high risk of there being a imperfection or like an air pocket around that piece of dirt that's going into the stone, and oftentimes that's what causes the cracks. And I do believe that that's what caused the crack when I was cutting it with my slicer Dremel bit. When you're cutting with those slicing Dremel bit thingies, there's a lot of vibrations going through it, and you have to make sure that you're holding your stone and your Dremel at the same angle. This also creates a lot of toxic silica opal dust, so that's another reason why I wanted to take it outside to work on it, so that, you know, I'm a little bit safer. Now, once I got off all the dirt from the bottom of this stone, I started working on the back and the sides, and I took off all those sharp pieces, but I did still have some dirt in the face of the stones, and I needed to take that off with the Dremel as well. There's that big line of sand running through the center of it, and it kind of infected all of my stones. I thought maybe it'd be a little bit less deep and a little bit more surface level, but it turned out for the biggest stone, this was not the case. For the largest stone of the three, the top dirt in the part that ended up being the face was pretty darn deep, and it made me have to take off a lot of the thickness of the stone, which was a bit of a bummer. But I feel like I was able to get a nice piece out of it anyways, and I'm excited to see the blue-green colors when it's all done. Taking off the corners of the smaller pieces, there was one piece that was a bigger piece and one piece that was quite a bit smaller, and the smallest piece of them I had a bit of trouble with. I was really trying to get all the dirt off of the bottom of it, but it just wasn't going away, so I decided to keep it there. And normally I wouldn't do this because, like I said earlier, sometimes dirt being left in the stone has imperfections around it, and it can cause it to break later on. Now, since I'm trying to make a necklace and a pair of earrings out of this stone, I really had to be careful and check the size and shape of it regularly to make sure that it fit my settings. You could kind of just eyeball it and try to cut your piece and then check it on the setting at the very end, but when I'm working on opals to make it fit a setting, I'm checking it constantly, every bit along the way. This is me working on the largest piece, and it did take me quite a long time to get rid of all the dirt that was in the back of this stone. I thought since it had that big kind of triangular part of the stone that I'd be able to get a taller stone. But again, this was not the case. The stone that I got, though, was still extremely gorgeous. And this is just me trying to work around the edges, starting with the tallest points and working my way around to get it into a round shape. Now, even before I start working on the edges of the stone, I do compare it to my setting, and I kind of hold my setting over it to make sure that I'm shaping it on the right side to get the biggest, most beautiful stone that I possibly can. So this stone, I could have taken it in really any which direction for it to fit my setting, because the largest setting that I had was still pretty small compared to this stone. Luckily, there was a lot of dirt in it, like I've said, and seemed to work out for it to fit just about perfectly. It really can be risky and stressful to take a stone in the rough and take a setting and cut it for that setting. For a lot of people, it's easier to just cut the biggest stone that you can and do your metalwork afterwards. Now, I personally am not versed in doing metalwork, and I just kind of buy settings and then cut the stones for the settings. And lately on my channel, I've just been cutting stones just to be stones, as big as they can be, because when fitting to a setting, you can take off a lot more carats than you really need to. Sometimes the prongs make you need to make the stone shorter, And sometimes you just want to make it shorter for a bezel, because if your stone is too tall, it just looks a little bit strange. But overall, I was able to get a pretty good flat back on all of these stones, and I was pretty pleased with what I was able to do. It's not every day that you get to work with a piece so big that you can cut it down into smaller pieces and make a set with it, and I really couldn't be happier with the shapes of the stones. Even if they were just a little bit, one of them being just a little bit dirty. That's not a problem, and we can work around that. Or work with it, or whatever. It's fine that there's dirt in it, as long as it doesn't crack. That's what I say. Just don't let it crack. Look for imperfections. So this is what they look like after I finish shaping them, and this is just me putting them in the settings just to check and make sure that they're not too small before I work on them on the Nova points, because you want them to like just barely fit, maybe be a little bit too big for this setting here. And that's about where they all were. They kind of all fit perfectly, but that's fine. We'll just have to be careful around the edges while we're working on it later in. So since the black Nova point and the brown Nova point do take off a lot of the stone, or they can, when you're working on the stone for it to fit a specific setting, you need to just be a little careful around the edges. But as far as the face and the back go, you can kind of just do what you normally would be doing. It's just the sides of the stone that you need to be careful about, but you still need to make sure that they're properly polished, because you can see the sides of the stone usually, depending on your setting. Some settings have prongs, and those settings, like my settings that I'm using, they have prongs. You can see the side of the stone in it. But some bezel mounts are pretty tall, and you don't need to worry about the sides as much. I still feel like you should. I still feel like you really should make sure that the sides of your stones are super polished, just as polished as the rest. But some people don't do that. I've noticed, just with other stones. I've bought jewelry in the past where they put it in the setting and it's just not polished on the sides, even in a prong setting, which is pretty wild. But yeah, make sure that your sides are polished, wipe off in between, and every Nova point, make sure and check, especially with the black Nova point and the brown Nova point, check that your stone is not too small for the setting, and that you don't have to go down in the size of the setting. If you cut too much and it's a little wiggly in there, you might have to go back all the way to the diamond point to get it to a shape to fit a different setting, which is kind of a bummer when you have to do that. I didn't have to do that, but yeah, that's no fun when you do have to do that. I have had to do that before. And that's one of the more stressful things about cutting an opal for a setting. But once you get to the silver and the pink Nova points, you're pretty much good to go. And really, with these stones, I really concentrated on the sides, on the silver Nova point, to get those scratches out. But I won't lie, one of these earring stones is got a higher dome than the other, and they're not perfectly even. The one has some dirt in the back, and yeah, and the other one has got a high dome, and the other one has a flat face. The one with the dirt is a flat face. I don't really care about that. It's like, I cut a pair of earrings from this. I'm happy with that. And as far as the necklace stone goes, I don't know, it's pretty gosh darn easy on that one. Haven't weighed it out yet, but it's large enough that I don't really have very much to worry about, and I'm pretty safe on that front. But yeah, just in between your Nova points, make sure that you got out the scratches of the previous Nova points, because on one of my stones I did have to go back to the pink Nova point, because the back had some little scratches in it, and we don't like that. Now, this is what they look like when they're still full of water, and the pattern hasn't really shown up yet, and of course they're not polished here. But I just kind of wanted to show you guys how crystal clear these ones got, and how little flash is left when they were wet. And then, again, I'm just checking them in the setting, because it's important. It's important to be sure. It's better to be sure than to not be sure. So I put them all in the settings, and then I put them in my drawer to, like, dry for a little bit. And 3 days later, this is what they looked like. Some of the flash had come back, but they just weren't totally dry yet. But I was getting impatient at this point, and I decided I'm gonna polish them anyways. Normally I would wait until they're totally dry, but again, I was getting impatient. I was like, I need to polish them. So I started on my polishing pastes. Now, when working with the two flatter stones, like the bigger necklace stone and the earring stone that had a flatter face, it was a bit easier to work with them on these. But the stone that had the high dome, I feel like I dropped it a lot. Which is totally fine as long as you can find it. And I was able to find it. Well, that's something to keep in mind, that these diamond grit pastes get pretty slippery. And the higher the dome, the harder it is to hold on to with your hands. And if you're somebody who uses dopping sticks, I would definitely do that at this point. Now, as you can see here, I had to switch out this felt tip for a larger felt tip, because the first felt tip was just too much vibrations going through it. Possibly the metal rod got bent or something, I don't know. But I hated the way it felt on my hand, so I switched it out for a new one, and I found this big one, and I highly suggest the big felt tips. Makes it way easier, because it's so plush, and it's not as harsh on your hand with all the vibrations and stuff. Not to mention that you get more surface area with these, and I feel like they're easier to fasten into my Dremel as well, so I might look into buying more of this size felt tip. Then moving on through the rest of my polishing pastes, I ran into a bit of an issue along the way, whereas I believe it was the second to last grit of these. The felt tip had something in it, again, and when I brought the largest stone to it to polish the back first, it left a bunch of tiny scratches in it. And I really didn't like that, so I switched out that tip as well. And I had to go all the way back to the first 5 micron all the way through, just to get those scratches out of the back of that stone. So it's really good to be sure that your felt tip is good and fastened and also clean. It was probably a piece of opal shard or something that got on it, and that, you know, that'll happen. It'll happen, and it's important not to get frustrated when these things happen. And just move forward with patience. Now, speaking of patience, it took me probably a total of 8 hours, maybe more, from start to finish, just working on these. I remember the first day, I started at like 5 p.m. and I finished at like 11 p.m. and that was just the shaping and the nova points. Not to mention that the polishing probably took me about 2 hours, and if that scratch up with the back of the biggest stone didn't happen, it would have taken me a dramatically less amount of time. So, that's just something else to keep in mind. It can take a long time to shape opal, and when you're working with Ethiopian, you need to do all of your wet stages at once. If I had stopped anywhere along the way in the nova points, I'd be putting them more at risk of cracking in the dry, and I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna sit there and spend my time and make sure that it's finished. But yeah, it took me a while. Yeah, it was 87 carats though. I mean, that's a lot. That's a big stone. But if I decided to make it just 1 stone instead of 3, it would have taken me probably 3 hours less. But I might not have been able to save as much because of all the dirt and that crack that happened when I was slicing it. Could have affected the stone later in the cutting, and that would have been really sad. So I'm glad that I did it how I did it. And I was able to make a set with it, which is awesome. It's really awesome to be able to make a set with 1 stone. Now, normally a set would entail a ring, but I don't do Ethiopian opal rings because when you take off a ring, you lose it, or somebody steals it, and you can't get these wet. So this is what they look like after the polish, and I'm gonna let them sit here and dry until they're totally dry, and then I'll set them in their respective settings. So at this point, I had set them in their settings, put on little loops onto the earrings, and they were looking pretty good. I was pretty sure that they were mostly dry. There's probably still some water in there, but I did wait an extra 3 days afterwards, just to make sure that they were properly dry before I set them. And yeah, they might dry out more. If they do, I'll show them off in their fully dried state in a short sometime. But this is what they end up looking like, and this is their flash. This one here ended up with a really nice kind of a pinfire flash, and that's the one that ended up having the dirt in the back of it. The earring with the higher dome is also super stunner, and it's got more like a linear kind of a pattern in it. It's still kind of pinfire-ish, but it catches the light in lines that go diagonally across the stone, which is pretty cool. And the pendant has the same kind of a pattern here, but a lot brighter. So the necklace piece ended up having the brightest of the colors in the whole set, and just look at that. It's freaking spectacular. I mean, super strong greens and blues. I could not be more happy with how these turned out. And I didn't accidentally scratch them or ruin any settings or anything, because that happens sometimes, but not this time. And this is where I realized that I screwed up, and I didn't weigh them before I set them. But that's okay, because I had settings left over of the same types of settings, and I was able to weigh those out and tear it on my scale here, so then I could put all the jewelry back on it and see what the size of all 3 stones together was. So I started by grabbing the earrings and putting them on there, and then finally I put the necklace piece on there, and it looks like I was able to save almost 12 carats, but not quite. When I weigh just the individual earrings, this piece here, which is the higher dome earring, ended up being 2.63 carats. And then let's weigh the other earring and see if it's similar weight. So yeah, this one's 2.36, so there's a bit of a difference there, but not too much, and I feel like they still look pretty good together. Let's put the setting of the necklace on just to see what size the necklace is, and it is 7.35 carats, so pretty nice. This is what the stone looked like before I cut it in its totally raw glory, and yeah, it was a lovely piece, and it yielded 3 gorgeous pieces of jewelry. So this is them in the sunlight, and I was lucky enough to get some direct sunlight today, but I would say that I do think that these look better under the lights in my house. Starting out as 87.2 carats and getting a total of 11.91 carats, we ended up losing a total of 0.29, almost 0.3 carats, which is a lot of carats, but should keep in mind that we lost carats when cutting it into pieces, and there was also a lot of dirt and potch on it, and it was the dense kind of dirt, which would be pretty heavy and have a lot of carats in the loss. And you know what? I'm super pleased with this. I think that they're beautiful. The pattern is amazing. I got a great shape and polish on all of them, and they're just a beautiful little set here. Just super happy with it. Here's every time I dropped them. Hey guys, so this is normally the point where I'd be showing off a painting, but I don't have any paintings for you guys this week. I appreciate you guys watching anyways. I know this has been a long video. I will be getting back to painting very soon, so keep an eye out for those in the future, but it might be a couple videos from now until that happens. But I hope you guys like this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Leave a comment anything that you want. I really appreciate comments. They really help my channel. Share this video if you have a community of people that you think would enjoy this. And subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the year. And I'll see you guys next time that I generally feel like posting. Thank you. Later.